Hello, everybody. Hey, I want to welcome you, friends, to our Church and Politics Zoom call. And Scott and I have been over the last 6 months just kind of, working out an opportunity for you to be informed, to you to be encouraged, to have conversations with your church, with your family about this whole concept of church and politics. And buddy, it's good to see you, Scott. He pastors in West Lynn, and they've got some campuses there. He also teaches at Western Seminary. I am the executive director at Church Venture Northwest, as well as a pastor in Hillsboro. So we're in the trenches. We know the wonderful joys of leading in a political age and a very charged age. And when we started in January, Scott, you started, and we kind of opened the conversation about the tension of our age. Buddy, in 6 months, it's gotten that much more tense. We're not here to talk about convictions or anything like that. Our own convictions, but not like, like civil, federal convictions.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I threw my own words out there. But we do want to talk about the convictions we have as followers of Jesus Christ. And so we are going to talk for a little bit. Scott's going to share, and then we'd love to take questions. So if you've got some questions, you can go ahead and put them in the chat. In February, then Josh Lane joined us. Josh is a pastor down in Sacramento, and he had a great pastoral tone and approachment to it, where he talked about unity. And what does it look like to put the church first, the unity of the church first over any political party? Then Professor Dr. Todd Miles came and spoke from Western, and he shared a great theological perspective and the distinction, that we should have as followers of Christ. Then Josh Butler came. Josh is a pastor up here in the Pacific Northwest, as well as a prolific author, and he shared from his recent book about the different quadrants. I found that really helpful. You've got left and right, but you've also got modern and postmodern, and in the middle is the table that Jesus sits at, and we're all invited to that table. I love what he said. Bring your lean. That's a great thing. You all lean one direction. Bring your lean, but reserve your bow for Jesus only. That was pretty cool. And then last month, I shared something I've been wanting to talk about, and that is kind of a history of the time of Jesus and the political tensions and conflicts that he was immersed in. We kind of see some of it in the Gospels. We see it around it as we study history. And I think a lot of that relates to our day. And I was just telling Scott earlier, one of the things I wrote in there is that we may be a one-issue voter, and there might be one thing that's really important to us, and that's great. For many, many, many Christians, abortion is a huge issue, and I believe it should be. But that doesn't mean we should be a one-issue Christian. There are a lot of biblical issues we should be thinking about, praying about, concerned about, and be holistic. And today, Scott is here to wrap it all up, to tie a bow on all of this mess. So thank you very much, Scott, for fixing any of the problems that I
Yes.
brought up.
It'll be so easy, I'm sure.
Now, Scott taught a class at Western Seminary. Was that in March?
It was.
Yeah, March. And I was only able to go on the one day, the first day, Friday, and it was just amazing. He did such a great job. The topics, the conversations, the room, it was a buzz. There were a lot of divergent thoughts, opinions, political leanings, but we were able to just wrestle through some things. But then I had some other things that I couldn't be there on Saturday, so I couldn't go. And so I missed the fun part, I guess. I heard it was just a wonderful riot you guys had. You almost burned the Western campus down. And
Well,
no, it wasn't quite
it's a
like that.
little bit of an overstatement, but
But it was on fire, is what I heard. I heard it was on fire. It was really good.
well, good. It was, yeah, we enjoyed it. It was a fun Saturday. Turned out I asked one question and it ended up spending the whole morning on it. So that's
Wow.
probably what we'll do today.
That is good. That is good. We are recording this, and so if you're unable to catch it or you're watching it at another time, if you'd like to reach out to Scott or myself, it'd just be great to do that. If we can serve you, many of our guests have given downloads or handouts, and they're on the website there at churchventurenw.com on this page. We'll keep it up through the end of the year. And we want you to be better because of it. And if there's anything we can do as pastors to support you in ministry, we are here beside you on that. So, Scott, I'm going to hand it over to you, and I'm going to kind of spotlight you. But give a quick overview of what you talked about on that second day and where are we going to go today, and then I'll throw you on the big screen.
Okay. Yeah, I just realized after, I mean, in some respect, after talking with my parents and with others, that for the church to be clear about who they are and about who Israel was and who America is, uh, and how those things kind of all get interwoven into our political framework. I just asked a question about something about Israel, and it we kind of got lost after that. So that was what I did that Saturday, and that's kind of what I want to do some today.
Well, I think it's a topic that's definitely on people's hearts and minds since October 7th, the
Yeah,
Hamas attack, and then the retaliation. And a day does not go by unless we hear about both sides
right,
and their rhetoric and their protesting and things like that. So maybe that's not the thrust of what you're going to talk about,
right.
but we might get there. So
It's there.
thank
Yeah.
thank you, buddy. I'm going to go ahead and spotlight you, and you are on.
Okay. Well, the first thing I'll say is I had to laugh about your intro. First of all, we have the joy of pastoring in a political climate. Thank you for reminding me that it's a joy. It isn't always, I guess. So I had to smile about that. The other thing I smiled about was you talked about what Josh Butler mentioned about bring your ling but save your bow for Jesus. The, Part of the whole genesis for my interest in this, I suppose, was my conversations with other pastors. And I talked to one when things were kind of at their worst or just a little after in 2020. And he had a guy leaving his church, like all of us did. And we're swapping stories about these exit interviews. And his exit interview, he said, the guy just said, I'm looking for an apolitical church. And he was just like flabbergasted. He said, I mean, we worked so hard to not be political. And so he said to the guy, he said, I don't think you're going to find a church that's more apolitical than ours. And, and the guy just looks at him straight away and says, yeah, you might be right, but I'm looking for an apolitical church that leans a little more to the left. And the whole idea of leaning, I think, is something that we do without even being conscious of it. But it really, that made me smile that they wanted a political church that leaned a little more one way or the other. So anyway, that was 4 years ago, and I'd love to think that it's gotten better, but I'm not completely sure that it has really. I just I just about had some health issues this last week. I was on Facebook. That tends to give me health problems. But there were a couple Facebook memes, one by somebody famous, one by somebody in my church. Um, Eric Metaxas said, if you're not sure you can vote for a convicted criminal, remember you worship one. And I just thought, somehow, somehow that's missing the point. And then the meme that I saw actually three times was this blue, it was a blue meme, maybe you've even seen it, just said, Jesus was convicted in a sham trial and crucified. I still follow him. And it turns out there's a member of my church who put that up. And then I thought, oh, I need to go probably comment or, do something about that. Couldn't find it, but instead found that one of the missionaries we support um, posted it. And I was just like, oh, you're kidding me. And so I just was so agitated. I didn't do anything. I thought, I got to go back and do something. And I saw it again. This time it was by a CV pastor. And I say that Jesus was convicted in sham trial and crucified, and I still follow him because you know what? As far as I'm concerned, voting for Trump's okay, but it's not okay to somehow make him parallel to Jesus or to bring Jesus down to his level. I mean, um, our church this week is actually I'm going to be preaching on the trial of Jesus, and I'm just going to say that the trial of Jesus and the trial of Trump were not the same, and I care, and this I think is the thing. This is where we have to get to, that I care very much more about Jesus than I do about Trump. And I hope that other Christians do too. And I just think we have to be far more on our game with the reputation of Jesus. And that's my concern. It's a discipleship issue, I think. Um, so it's still there, and it's still getting more and more stressful. I saw another another news item. This is news. Are you ready for this? Former President Donald Trump joins TikTok as previous after a previous position to ban the social media platform, surpasses President Joe Biden's followers in 24 hours. And I thought, really, when did this become news? What is happening in our world that this joining TikTok is newsworthy? But anyway, may the Lord help us. We've got another 5 more months of this, and I trust that all of us will pay close attention to Jesus in the meantime, and care about his reputation over and above any of our political affiliations. But anyway, just a quick word about that. I think that's a discipleship issue, and for me, that's the job of a pastor or church leader, is to make disciples. But pastor, it's a job of every Christian, really. But to be a disciple is to bring all of life under the authority of Christ. Jesus said, and that's how Jesus starts the Great Commission, isn't it? All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples. And when I think about the call of discipleship, it is a government. It is a statement about government. It's a statement about authority and where authority comes from. It's all authority. It comes from Jesus, and it's the same same word that's used in Romans 13. And I need to first and foremost be submissive to Jesus in every area of my life, including my politics. And that is easier said than done. That Jesus makes a claim on me that says my preeminent allegiance, my preeminent submission must be to him. My concern must be for him rather than for my favorite candidate or political party. And so what I'm trying to do when I make disciples is help people bring everything under the authority of Christ, including the area of life that we call politics. And so for all of us, there are parts of our life that are more under the authority of Christ and less under the authority of Christ. And it's my responsibility as I answer to the chief shepherd is to shepherd and disciple people so that their political opinions, their political communication, and their political behaviors come under the authority of Christ. And the problem with that, I'm just going to say, and I think James hinted on this a moment ago, is that is a long-term prospect. In other words, it's a lifetime prospect of bringing my life under the authority of Jesus and helping other people do that. And we only have a short time. We have 5 months left. And so I have some ideas about long-term discipleship, but we don't have time for that. So what is there that we can do in the short term? What is the short run? What things do I need to get clear on in the short run? And this is the way that I would probably think about it. One is that identity politics has become a topic of contention and conversation in the past several years. And I just think it's worth noting that it's probably a fool's errand to think that people can approach politics apart from how they identify themselves. And the reality is that our identity, no matter what it is, shapes our actions and opinions. And that's what identity means, is that it can't help but work itself out in the way that we live our lives. And while I'm not advocating that we somehow dice up everybody's identity and have these various cross intersectionality or anything like that, I just think the church needs to figure out who it is. I think we need to figure out who we are as a church. I think that we need to lay claim to our identity in this new American landscape. And so a couple things need to happen. I think we need to figure out who is who, and then figure out who we are. And so to do that, I'm gonna try and share four different statements of identity, and hopefully they will be helpful. I imagine that some may be less comfortable than others, but I think we got to get cleared up on some of these things. So the first thing that I want to say, the first identity statement is this: America is not Israel. America is not Israel. Israel had and by Israel, there's lots of ways the word Israel is used, at least 5 different ways, of course, in the Bible, and then several ways outside the Bible. I'm talking about Israel as the covenant people of God in primarily in the Old Testament. And so they are the people of God that began as a family and grew into a nation state that has a unique covenant relationship with God that was established with Abraham, and then with Moses, and then with David. And Israel had a covenant relationship with God. America, as a country, has no relationship with God. Unless God establishes it, nations cannot expect a special relationship, for God to have a special relationship with them. This covenant was initiated by God. All covenants are. And so we as a nation really don't have that kind of relationship with God. And I say that for 2 reasons, really. One is that we as a nation, first of all, have no right to the Old Testament promises or blessings or even commands in the Old Testament. There's not a one-for-one correlation between Old Testament Israel and America. Okay, fine. I mean, that's not an issue until you decide you're going to have a prayer meeting and you use 2 Chronicles 7:14, right? If my people who are called by my name shall humble themselves and seek my face and pray and turn from their wicked ways, I'll look from heaven and I'll heal their land. Okay, that is a great promise, not to America, but to Israel. And so the covenant people of God need to turn. That's who my people are. They needed to turn, and there is no parallel in America. And so we just need to kind of treat the scriptures carefully that way. Another place that is probably equally as stressful is Deuteronomy 28, which on the face of it really sounds great. It says this: if you faithfully obey the voice of the Lord your God, being careful to do his commandments that I command you today, the Lord your God will set you high above all the nations of the earth, and all these blessings shall come upon you and overtake you. If you obey the voice of the Lord your God, blessed shall you be in the city, blessed shall you be in the field, blessed here, blessed there, and it just continues. Now, all of us would love this kind of blessing from God, but this kind of blessing from God is really at the climax of the reiteration of this covenant that God made with Israel. And so this is a part of the covenant blessing to Israel, that they would be blessed that way. And you can't just pull that into American life, hook, line, and sinker, and suggest that this material blessing that God promised his covenant people is available to America if we just, shall I say, behave. There is another facet of this, and that is that some of the commands to Israel don't apply directly to us. For instance, Psalm 122, 6-9. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May they be secure who love you. Peace be within your walls and security within your towers. For my brothers and companions' sake, I will say, peace be with you. For the sake of the house of the Lord our God, I will seek your good. And that's wonderful. And I want there to be peace in Jerusalem. I, like James mentioned earlier, hope for and pray for an end of the conflict in Gaza, and that both sides would do what's right, and that human life would be spared, and all of the things. That is different from praying for the peace of Jerusalem, because this goes on, like I said in verse 9, for the sake of the house of the Lord, which is not there any longer. And so for us to say, oh, the mandate that we have is to pray for and somehow support Israel because they have the name Israel, or because of Jerusalem, I think is an overstep in how we would understand the relationship of America or the church to Israel. So that's probably the first thing that means, is that we don't have a right to the Old Testament promises, blessings, or commands. The other thing that it means that America is not Israel is this, that morality does not equal God's blessing. See, I think that one of the things that drives a lot of Christians' engagement in politics is if we can just upgrade the morality of America, then we'll be better off, and God will in turn bless us. And so, if we keep the law, we'll be prosperous and blessed by God. And I just want to say, if even if this were true, this would be the opposite of the Christian gospel, where you somehow earn your favor from God. You don't earn favor from God in the Christian gospel. Christ has earned your favor from God. And so this, though, does boil down to why our founders were interested in protecting the free exercise of religion, because it created moral people. Even John Adams, in his letter to the Massachusetts militia on October 11th, 1778, most of you have probably heard this, our Constitution was made for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate for the government of any other. He also wrote, we have no government armed with power capable of contending with human passions unbridled by morality and religion. And while that may be true, that is not necessarily the thing that drives Christian engagement in politics. Now, that does tell me that I want Christians to be engaged in politics, and I want, for the sake of America, for the church to be the church, but it's different than saying I am going to enact morality by my political involvement and thereby secure God's blessing. That is not the case, because America is not Israel. That's the first thing. Second thing that I would say, and I'm going to try and be short on this one, this is more theological, and it's not as much to the point here, and that just simply is that Israel is not the church. This is the second identity statement. Israel is not the church, or you could say church is not Israel, because the church exists because of Jesus. And I believe that Jesus has fulfilled the promises to Israel, and so our trust in him connects us with Yahweh. But and so I wouldn't say the church is replacing Israel in God's plan, but more that Christ has replaced Israel. That he is, John 15, it says he is the vine, when in the Old Testament, Israel was God's vine, planted, plucked up from Israel, or plucked up from Egypt and planted in the promised land. That Jesus is the true seed of Abraham, through whom all the nations will be blessed. That Jesus is the greater prophet than Moses, who will ultimately take out a heart of stone and put in a heart of flesh and write the law within us. That Jesus is the true son of David, so that it is Jesus who will be on the throne forever and ever. And so, anyway, we're not trying to make Israel or America into a new Israel, but we are God's people, the church, without national identity. And that's really important because we just get so myopic, especially we'll be myopic in the next 5 months. We'll forget that God's church transcends nation states. It transcends time and it transcends space. It's worldwide, and members in a house church in China are every bit as full-fledged members of the Church of Jesus as they are in Westland, Oregon. And they are, their priorities should be, because they share really the same reason for being that I share. Their priorities, my priorities should sync up maybe better than the priorities that I would have as an American. So anyway, that's just something to think about. But time and space is a big deal with the church. It's worldwide. It's millennia old, and so you must know that the church transcends time and space. And while I'm tempted to say more about that, that's not quite as much on point to what I want to talk about today. But I do think I need to say that America's not Israel. Israel's not the church. And then third, the church is not America. The church is not America. That's the third identity statement. And this is really hard for us because it's all we know, most of us. And the distinction between being a Christian and being an American is one that we haven't really thought about. I'm saying we because I hadn't really thought about it until 2020. And in all fairness, the nation itself has not completely thought about it. There have been places where it's clear and places where it's not clear. But people came to America from the old world with religious convictions. And I'm just going to say that their history is complicated. They came from an established church. They came to escape an established church, and that is all they knew. And they came to America, and for the most part, restarted one. But it's just an established church that agreed with them, and it was really several hundred years until all of the establishments of religion had disappeared. And America was not Christian. Religious, yes, but not Christian. And it was built, I think, to be intentionally pluralistic. You might even be able to say that there was space that was secular that was intended by our founders. So just a couple thoughts on this to see how fast I can go on this. But you're probably aware that Thomas Jefferson drafted the Declaration of Independence, and he had different language in there than we have come to know and love. He said, when he drafted it, "We hold these truths to be sacred and undeniable, that all men are created equal and independent, that from the equal creation they derive rights inherent and inalienable. Among them are the preservation of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." That was his draft, that these truths are sacred. And he sent it to Benjamin Franklin, and Franklin said, reworked it and said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident." Self-evident is very different than sacred, that all men are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. There is a creator involved in their view of the world, and he endowed us with certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So I say that because there was a strong Christian influence in the founding of our country, no doubt about it. Glenn Scribner, in his book, The Air We Breathe, points out that these rights that the Declaration says are in self-evident. He says they're anything but self-evident. In fact, they'd never been self-evident in the history of humanity. But what our founders did was began to attempt an experiment to have the benefits of Christianity without Christ. to have the kingdom without the king. His thought is that they wrote a creed that I just read the first part of it to you, that was a secular creed. In some respect, an attempt to have a nation state where there was no established religion, and yet one that retained the benefits of religion without its entanglements. And so that's complicated. I think we have to admit it's complicated, and that we have to navigate this as citizens first of Christ's kingdom, and then of America. So what does that mean? It means the church and America are two different things. The church is determined to live under God's rule, and the other is determined to make the best life possible, gaining some of the benefits of that rule without entangling itself with the king. And so there are a couple things that I would add about this. One is, I think we need to know ourselves. This goes to the identity piece. I need to know who I am and why I'm the way I am. Let's just say you have some various political opinions. I hope you do. Some of those political opinions are informed by the Bible, your faith in the kingdom of heaven. Things like your belief in the sanctity of human life that James mentioned earlier. I hope that is there for you, and I hope that the reason you believe it is that it's anchored very deeply in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, 27, in the image of God. And so there are some of your political opinions that are informed that way. There are some of your political opinions, and this is, I think, why I bring this up, that are informed not by the Bible, but by your American citizenship. And so you are going to go to the polls, and you're going to make decisions about candidates and policies and maybe referendums or something that don't have much to do with the Bible. I mean, what does the Bible say about infrastructure? What does the Bible say about foreign policy? What does the Bible say about gun control? The Bible has some to say about personal debt. What does the Bible, it maybe has something to say about national debt, but it probably is not completely clear about how that will all play out. So what do I have to say about that? I have to say, you can align with the political party on any of these, and you know what? You have my blessing. And I would love for you, I want all of us, we care about our neighbors, so we want good infrastructure for them. We want them to be safe, so we want good foreign policy. And we're all in this together. That's why it's political. That's why we feel strongly about it. But and you can have political opinions, and you can even just toe the party line if you'd like on these things that are not informed by the Bible. That is fine. But please, please, please don't pass them off as the Christian position on these things. I mean, the Christian position on infrastructure is really going to be hard to articulate. And there are some other things, but then to say that Christians have to vote a certain way is really hard. Related to that, I think it's important to say that political candidates don't line up with Christian positions either, in whether it's in their character, whether it's in their policies, whether it's in just their rhetoric or way of treating other human beings. If they don't, then you can't really say that that's the Christian person to get behind. Jesus doesn't align with one or the other. And so America is not the church is not America. And there isn't a Christian position or a Christian candidate or a Christian way of looking at partisan politics. Related to that, my hope and my discipleship hope for you, my discipleship hope for your church, all of our churches, is that we identify with Jesus more fundamentally and more with more zeal and earnestness than we identify with any political party. That is fine to identify with political party, but not at the expense of the reputation of Jesus, not at the cost of the reputation of Jesus being denigrated. And so please, please, please think about Jesus before you post something on social media. Please have the heart for Jesus first. And the thing that's hard about this, right, is I'm using it in a sentence. We say we care about America. We say we care about the church. Who are we when we say we? That's the identity question. What is our primary identity? And I say this because in the last election, people threw away their identity with Jesus in preference of a partisan identity. And people left friends of really years and years to go switch churches that agreed with them politically rather than their community, rather than their theology. And so please identify with Jesus before and above and more robustly than you identify with the political party. Well, then I'm just going to say something really quick here at the end. My fourth identity statement is that America is most like Babylon. The reality is you can find America in the Bible. Some people wonder about that. But at least you can say America is one of the nations. Nations come and go, even in the Bible, and God governs their rise and their fall. And if you do a word search on nations and then look at how God governs the nations, it will give you great hope for this coming election. And that's all you need to do. You don't need to say America's Israel or the church. You don't need to bring Israel or the Old Testament into it. Just look at the nations and see God governing the nations. And you'll have great hope for what's going on even in America. That said, though, if you're most abstract, America is like the nations. But if you were to say, get more concrete, there is a nation that America is more like. And I would say that is Babylon. That if you take, first of all, if you take the indicators of the blessing of God that people love about America, economic strength, military strength, expansiveness, influence, peace, all of those things, in the Bible, Babylon was the poster child for those things. And in those categories, America shines and America enjoys what we would say is God's blessing. Now, in their book, Jesus and the Powers, N.T. Wright and Michael Bird discuss what makes an empire an empire. And it's kind of those things: expansiveness, economic strength, military strength, and influence. And they say that you can understand the Bible by understanding empires. And if you think about it, there's a lot that will help you there. I mean, Egypt, first of all, Babylon, Rome, and then after the Bible's written, Christendom, all of those things really help you see what's going on there. But that said, America parallels, I think, more closely Babylon than maybe anything else. And I think I can say that on fair grounds, because Babylon's used not just literally, like for the place in the Middle East, but figuratively. It is a type of a strong empire. Peter uses it in his letter. She who is in Babylon, who is likewise chosen, sends you greeting. And he's not writing from the Middle East. He's writing, we believe, from Rome. And so that's who he's talking about. You get the same thing in the book of Revelation. When you get to Revelation 18, it's likely that when Babylon the Great has fallen, he has in view the fall of Rome, and that it's those characteristics that I mentioned earlier that are highlighted in Revelation 18. The kings and the sailors and the merchants are the ones who weep for Babylon because of the economic prosperity, the military prosperity, and the expansiveness, influence wielded by the empire. So Um, that puts us then, as the church, not in necessarily the driver's seat, but as exiles in Babylon. Where the church is the same place now as the church was when the New Testament was written. That we are inside an empire as a foreign threat, proclaiming a different king. And just like the environment was religious then, it's still religious now. It just has a different message. And so the church engages as exiles in Babylon, which is, again, the letter to First Peter is written like this: Beloved, I urge you as sojourners and exiles to abstain from passions of the flesh which wage war against your soul. Keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable. So he goes on just to define them that way and say, this is a good way to look at yourself in the way that you engage the empire. Now, you might say, that's not fair. I don't like that you're saying America's like Babylon. That's fine. There are some despicable things about Babylon, no question. And I'm not saying that primarily to critique America. Please don't hear that. I'm saying it to place the church in its relationship to America. And I want the church to be like the saints of the Old Testament, like Jeremiah and like Daniel. Because when they talked about exiles in Babylon, they saw it as they saw God just as much as king in Babylon as he was in Jerusalem. And so Jeremiah tells the exiles to build houses, live in them, plant gardens, eat their produce, take wives and sons, take wives for your sons, and give your daughters in marriage that they may bear sons and daughters, multiply, do not decrease, seek the welfare of the city where I sent you in exile, pray to the Lord on its behalf for its welfare. In its welfare, you will find your welfare. It strikes me that that kind of posture, which isn't primarily even voting or a political posture, it's really engage in the world around you. That's the kind of conversation that Jeremiah has, because Jesus is still king in Babylon. And I would say Jesus is still king in America, and that needs to be the message proclaimed by the church. So the marching orders for the church are not primarily political, but they are subversive with prayers, with preaching, with our lifestyle, representing the King Jesus in the world. And to the degree we can do that, representing King Jesus in American politics as well. So that's probably more than enough, but that's what I got today.
All right, let me get you unspotlighted. That was great. That was a lot.
Yes, it was. Sorry.
I don't know if it's heated up in your office or not, but I appreciate that. A couple questions just to start with. You mentioned your upcoming message and a statement about Trump as far as the conviction. Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you decide when to share something and when not to share something?
Okay.
When do you intentionally poke the bear or let it sleep?
Okay. That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. I would say that, first of all, I'm going to get some counsel on that. Maybe some of you want to give me counsel, that's fine. I'm going to get some counsel before I do that. Number one. Number two, I think that one of the ways we prepare our people is make application of the scripture to all of life. That includes making application of scripture to politics. And so when you've got a sham trial of Jesus on the docket, and there are people who are fussing about another sham trial, I think that that's a place to really highlight the preciousness of Jesus. And so as far as poking, I'm not going to poke. I mean, people can think what they want about Trump's trial. In fact, yeah, I expect and hope that some people in our church will vote for Trump. That's all great. That's not why I would bring it up. I would bring it up because I want the people in my church to consider Jesus as so precious that I mean, they're not going to compare Jesus to Trump or to Caitlin Clark or to Superman, or I mean, Jesus in a class by himself, and I want Jesus to be in the class by himself. That's why I bring it up, and if I can't do that, I probably shouldn't bring it up. So, and I'm not sure I
Okay.
can, so I got to be a little careful about that.
That's
But
good.
that's why I broke it up. That's why I brought it up here, though. I will say.
That's okay. Um, so here's another question relates to IRS. What can we say and can we not say so we don't lose our tax status?
Um, for the most part, you can't endorse a candidate. Basically, that's the thing. I don't think that's the main concern for churches. I think I think that if I could identify what I'm concerned about for churches, it's that it's not that we make the bald face endorsement of a candidate that would cause us to lose our 501c3. That's not what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about that we tacitly make one candidate God's candidate and treat a different way than that. And that you never lose your tax exempt status for that. That's been happening. That's been happening for 200 years. But I that's the thing that we have to be careful about as pastors, I think. So I don't
Okay,
think.
specifically though, so can't endorse a candidate. So as a pastor, you can't stand up
Yeah.
there and say, I'm voting for, or I'm
Or
encouraging
well, I can't
to
say
vote.
you should vote for. I can't um, press somebody else's conscience into service
Okay.
on the topic.
What about the other issues that come up in election seasons, ballots and measures and things like that?
Um, Yeah, I think that you can talk about issues with ballot measures that are biblical issues, and I think you should. Again, I think um, you leveraging your spiritual authority to get somebody to make a political decision is where it crosses the bounds, and I'd probably have to review a little bit on exact rules for whether you lose your tax exempt status, but ethically that would certainly be the case. But I do think that you have to speak out in truth about what the biblical issues are, if there are some on the in a referendum or something like that. So,
One of the things that's been, distributed in churches for many years that I know of are voter guides, Christian voter guides. And so here are where the candidates stand. That voter guide maybe says it's impartial or intends to be impartial, but it lists where the candidates stand on the issues that Christians care about.
mhm.
Is that acceptable to hand out in church, or wise or not wise to hand out in church?
um, you know, I think those are two different questions. So I'm glad you rephrased it. I wouldn't say acceptable or not acceptable, but I would say unwise because the church is not America, and we, I frankly, I do consult that when I vote so that I know what is happening. But to send it out in church and say, you know what, here this is the church's recommendation. I mean, not nobody says that, but passively or tacitly, by that being handed out in church, I think you say that. And the other thing that I've just come to see is that the number of so-called Christian issues are not completely they're not correctly identified on those things in my mind. I mean, there are largely gun control issues. I mean, not largely, there are gun control issues on those voter guides that the Bible doesn't say much about gun control. And so I think it's going to be hard to say that this represents the Bible. You know what I mean? It does represent things that people in churches have traditionally cared about, but that's not the same. And I think the more clear we can be as people in the kingdom of heaven, the happier we'll be on that. That's my take on it. And so
Unless the
we
person,
no longer hand those out.
no, that's fine. That's fine. Um, I appreciate and agree with what you're saying. I also hear people say guns are the cause of violence and death, and we should care about that. And so, therefore, if we can have more gun control, we might be able to curb the needless violence. Just the same thing with drugs and all kinds of things.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
it's a challenging conversation to have.
Yeah, a lot of times it's the opposite that ends up on the voter guide, the Christian voter guide, though. It's not
Okay.
who's against gun control, ends up on that voter guide. It's been
Oh,
my experience. So anyway, I just think that we have to um, treat it with care, and the more clarity we can bring to it, the better. Okay. So I don't know if you're trying to provoke me or not, but you did. You're successful. Um, I
well,
think we
these are
have
just real world scenarios.
I think we have some real world scenarios that we have to think about
Yeah.
with regard to Memorial Day, with regard to Fourth of July, with regard to patriotic songs in a service a worship service that is to exalt Jesus as King. And I just think we have to, the church has to do some hard work and make some hard decisions about that, about, Preston Sprinkle said in his, and we'd say in public, but he said in the book, he doesn't pledge allegiance to the flag anymore, because his allegiance only goes to Jesus.
Mm.
Um, I'm still thinking about that. I've not had the opportunity or been faced with that decision as of late, but I think he's on something.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just think those are the kinds of, you're right, those are the kinds of rubber meets the road, non-voting things that we as a church have to get clear on. I'll tell you, when the Church Not America, uh, we had American flags in our church, okay? And this particular congregation had multiple American flags, and I took them out, and it wasn't particularly popular. And somebody said, I think that they should be back in. And I think that if uh, needs to like recognize that's where we are and that's who, And I said, one of the things you need to recognize is that the church transcends that flag. The church is bigger than that flag. And we have people from other nations who worship here. And this person said to me, well, if they're going to be here, they should essentially submit to, they should love our country. That's basically it. They should love our country. And it's like, that's not the same. It's a church. They don't have to love and agree with America to love and agree with Jesus and submit to Jesus. So anyway, it's complicated, and you can have flags in your church and I'll still love you, but I think it's the kind of work I think we need to do as shepherds and leaders in church.
Yeah. We took those out as well years ago. And I love scouting, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. That's great. We had several troops throughout the years come to us and want to be endorsed, and we'd love to use the facility for that and everything. But that came with a requirement that one Sunday a year we'd have a God and Country Sunday,
Oh,
and I just said we can't do that. We
hmm.
can't do that.
Wow.
Um, we'll support you and partner with you, but we cannot take over one of our services for a God and Country Sunday. Scott, we just got a couple minutes left. One last question. As a pastor, what are your plans leading up to November, and what should we be thinking about?
Well, I think, this is my opinion, I think churches ought to do something to address it. James, I really appreciate you doing this for our association. I think it's worth trying. Now, some of the reason is that, guess what? It's not going to be perfect. We're not going to solve all the problems. The whole church is not going to get aligned, you know, probably at all. But I think trying to do something sends a message, a leadership message that, you know what, we're just not going to sit here and let 2020 happen to us again.
Mhm.
That's just a leadership thing. That's not church or even a pastoring thing. It's just like, you know what, we're not going to take it sitting down again. We're going to do our best to so that we know what we're trying to do, and then we're going to try and represent Jesus better than we did before. And we'll grow in this, and we'll do better next year than or next election cycle than we did this one. Our church, what we did, I would not do a one-off message. I think you're asking for trouble. Our church adopted kind of as our goal, what we're trying to do is to help families have better conversations around the Thanksgiving dinner. I just remember Thanksgiving dinners in 2020 were tense, kind of everywhere. Everything was tense, but Thanksgiving dinners. And so we said, we're going to try and help your family have better conversations around Thanksgiving dinner. And so we're going to have this Sunday our third family conversation about politics, and trying to help people learn the skills to have better conversations, then apply them. Essentially, the outline I used today was what I used for our church in the last conversation. And then we're going to do actually in the third one, kind of what I did in January here about false gospels, help our church identify that they're believing something that looks like the gospel, smells like the gospel, but isn't the gospel. So
Okay.
those are some things that we're doing, and I would recommend doing something just to send a statement that says we're it's an important part of human life, and we're not going to have a free for all here again.
Just don't do it the weekend before the election because it's not helpful at that point.
Yeah, it's too little, too late, and that's the danger even now, really.
Even now, yeah, exactly. Okay, well, Scott, I appreciate you, appreciate your friendship and what you've been doing. You have a podcast. Remind us of the name of the podcast.
The name of the podcast, I meant to slip it in the talk, is called City on a Hill, and it's because of the confusion from the very beginning that America was going to be a city on the hill. From Ronald Reagan's America's City on the Hill. Really, it's from Jesus that the church is a city on the hill. So, church is not America.
Okay. So, and I've listened to many of those, and those are great. Those are fun. You and Eric do that, and it's good. I think there's a lot we can read. We've referenced books and things like that. But if there's anything we can add to that, we'll put it on the website. Maybe here's just some books for you to read if you want to do that. You've mentioned books, I've mentioned books, and there are books I probably would recommend one-on-one to someone, but I wouldn't mention at large because they carry with them a lot of other baggage. You know what I mean? I've listened to books lately I probably wouldn't recommend, but I needed to listen to it. You have to get through some things, right?
Yeah.
On either side, just to be able to understand where people are coming from. But I really appreciate it. And we are at our hour now, and I thank you for that. And if there's anything we can do for you as pastors in churches, Church Venture, Scott, connected to us, seminary, we've just been around a while, and we would love to walk with you through it. So please feel free to reach out to us. We don't have it all done and down. And Pat, we just don't know, but we are on the journey, and we want you to be as well. Men and women who love the Lord, who are guiding and discipling others towards Jesus and what he wants to see happen in our world today. So God bless you. We thank you very much for tuning in the series, and they're all posted online. You could grab those, one or all six, and we hope they've served you. So God bless. Thank you, Scott, so much.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this, James.